Hello, thank you for tuning in and joining us. For those of you that are watching, my name is Allison and I'm on the team at Business for Peace. I'm here at our office in Oslo, Norway, and I'm so pleased to be joined by video by Dr. Nadia Al-Sakkaf. She is currently a political and developmental researcher specializing in gender politics in Yemen. She was a former chief editor of the Yemen Times and also former Minister of Information and, of course, a Business for Peace honoree as well. So thank you for joining us. How are you? Where are you now?
Thank you for having me. It's actually a pleasure to reconnect virtually. I am based in the UK currently. I just finished my PhD in politics of gender, and I am in touch with Yemen and the Yemeni community as such. So doing well considering.
Great. Congratulations on finishing your PhD too. That's a huge accomplishment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It came in a good time.
Great. Great. Wonderful. Then I guess we'll just jump in and get started. Could you start by giving us an overview of the COVID-19 situation in Yemen? I think a lot of us probably aren't very familiar with the situation there.
Sure. Now, Yemen, if you've heard in the news, it has been going through an armed conflict since September 2014. And so part of this conflict is that there is an isolation of the country. So the flights and ships and civilian going and coming into the country is very limited. And so in a way, that was a blessing because it helped the virus not come into the country for such a long time. So relatively speaking, the first case was reported officially was in April 10th.
Wow.
So
Late.
that was quite late considering compared to the rest of the world, which in a way should have helped prepare because we knew inevitably it should have come to the country because you cannot stop such a virus from coming in one way or the other. However, the country has been in armed conflict and there is no authority per se. So there's no state and there are people fighting on so many fronts. So who is going to prepare for this? It's left to the civil society and to the private sector in a way. So it's considered the worst humanitarian crisis of the century. More than 80% of the population are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. That's around 24 million people. And many of them are very vulnerable to other diseases because of the lack of sanitation, clean water, infrastructure, electricity, and so on. So imagine for Yemenis to start with, the priorities are a bit different. Although now with the endemic coming, there are more than 57 cases so far. But the unreported cases could be many, many more. We just don't have a good system to document. And there are other diseases that are going around, such as dengue fever, cholera, malaria, and shingleia. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's another disease that's been spreading and actually claiming lives, especially in the coastal city of Aden. So to the Yemeni public, until April, COVID-19 was unreal. It was something they read in the news. To them, what was real was the war and the hunger. And then when we started doing, because I'm on the board of two media organizations, and I help the strategic the media strategy of these organizations and other networks. So I was saying we have to be ahead of this. We have to start educating the public. So at times when we tell people about washing their hands with soap, social distancing and things like that, some of the reactions we faced were so sad. Like some people would say, you're telling me to wash my hands with soap and water. I don't have access to soap and water. I mean, or like for some communities, women have to walk so many miles just to get clean water. So it's for them is like superstitious in a way, like you're saying wear masks and they can't find food.
Yes.
Just another thing on this is that for many young Yemenis, especially men who are there on the front lines, they say they'd rather die in the front line fighting because a bullet is faster than suffocation because of the COVID-19. So kind of I'm sorry, it's just like, it's like the death wish. Would you rather die by this or this? But death is inevitable. That's the reality of Yemenis. In the same time, I mean, this is Ramadan. this is a religious time in Yemen, and so many social gatherings and prayers. And although the endemic has spread in the country, they're still meeting and praying together and socializing. There's a disconnect or a denial of the extent of this, and it's scary. It's like even in the social media, we keep spreading messages and telling people, you know, what's the most common emoji? It's this one. Like many years are like, oh my God, there he goes. Yeah, it's like there they go again, and gather and congregate. So there's that denial aspect of it. There's so much to tackle, actually.
Thank you for sharing all that. It's certainly very different than what we see here in Norway. Many of us can't imagine having to make those trade-offs or even have those thought processes. So I think it's important to understand the realities elsewhere. So thank you. And I understand that you are specifically working on certain projects in response to this pandemic to try and help the situation in Yemen. Could you tell us about your new initiatives in that regard?
Sure. I'm part of like several different small, let's say, projects here and there. I mean, to start with, there is the community awareness that we're doing through the radio stations and online platforms. There's 2 community radios in the country. And the thing about community radios is that they are apolitical. So we try to isolate from the political tension and talk about the urgent need for awareness. And so that we're doing. And that there are women-led organizations that we are supporting and that I'm a member of, such as the Women's Solidarity Network. And one of our member or partners is Food for Humanity. And this organization is actually helping communities access clean water and awareness on the ground. And I must say that women-led organizations are doing much better than men-led organizations. I mean, I don't know if this is globally, but for Yemen, they are more effective. They're good at mediation, and they're like cut through the nonsense and just get things done. I don't know if it's related to their sense of responsibility as nurturers, or they are the ones who are peace builders, I believe. Then there's also the global advocacy element. So what we're trying to do with the Business for Peace Track initiative, we're trying to amplify Yemeni women's leaders' voices through publishing op-eds and commentary pieces in international media, trying to bring a different perspective. On this point, I must say that I'm very disappointed with the mainstream global media. Like international newspapers refuse to accept the op-eds from these women, say it's not important, or these women, because they don't have a well-known byline, they say, or whenever they talk about something that is not hot, like if you're not talking about terrorism or the war, you're talking about community development or something that is more sustainable, they say, no, we're not interested. So that's been it's been disappointing. And then there's the private sector initiative. Yemeni businessmen have come together and they're trying to play the role of the government. They're trying to substitute for the lack of the state. They're working together with the World Bank, with the World Health Organization to provide testing equipment, masks, and health facilities. Like, it's amazing how they're coming together with the social responsibility and stepping in. And finally, like, I'm very impressed with Yemeni entrepreneurs, tech-based. So there was a hackathon that was launched last month, and the first phase of it finished. And in this hackathon, we had 3 ideas that passed to the next phase. And these ideas were, there's a medical consultation app, so that Yemenis could like send their symptoms and have a medical expert or a consultant on the other end giving them advice so as not to need to go to the health center to avoid crowded areas. The other was a fast-paced, low-cost mask production line, which will produce 60 masks per minute. And the third one was recycling plastic to create PPE kits and so on, using 3D printing. So, I mean, there's so many amazing ideas, and if we could just amplify this, give them more support, like there's so much potential.
Yes.
And if we could draw the attention there instead of the focus on the war and the hunger, that would be really good.
Yeah, a lot of that is very encouraging. And I mean, for us, many of our viewers, I think, are in Norway or in Europe. Are there things we can do to help support some of these efforts? I know I'd heard from you previously that you have online petitions. So if you could, yeah, maybe just tell us if there are ways we can get involved to support these great community-driven initiatives.
I mean, definitely, there are two tracks we could do this. The one is the global issues. Like, for example, we could work on a petition to drop the debts. The Yemen as a country is indebted to the World Bank and IMF and so on. So if we could do like campaign for removing them and wiping the slate clean. And there are other things that we could encourage the advocacy internationally of working directly with the private sector and the business community instead of the pseudo governments or like potential, I mean, to cut through the bureaucracy and work with the people who are directly working on the ground. I think advocacy on that line, and also to campaign for a ceasefire, for stopping the war in the country. There is a petition. We could put a link in the subtext of this interview, if you allow me. And the other side is to support the initiatives, like whether it is just even a like or a retweet, a comment, or in media, we could give space for these women and young entrepreneurs and advocates. Just give them a platform as an alternative. Obviously, there is technical know-how and expertise. So if we put more about these initiatives online and people say, oh, I can help them, I know how to do this better, or an online platform, or some things, just a networking aspect or connecting with the right people. And obviously there is the funding element of it. But it's not always about money. Many times it's just about connecting to the right people, or just giving a thumbs up when spirits are down. It goes a long way.
That's great. There's such a breadth of things. So yeah, if you want to, after this, email me some of those links. We'll definitely share them where we share this so that people can get involved. Like you said, whether it's liking and sharing,
Yeah.
or if they have money or expertise, or the petition that you want to link to. So we'll definitely include that and help you however we can. So I wanted to then pick up on, you've started to talk a little bit about the role of business. Of course, we're very interested in the role of business and ethical business in helping shape society and improve things. So what role do you see for the private sector in Yemen? Could you say more about that, about the private sector's role currently?
Sure. So Yemen is a large country in terms of its demographic spread and population. In the same time, it's very fragmented. So you have so many political powers fighting over so many places. So there is no national authority. There's no national control. And so it has become the de facto element of development, recovery, and construction in the hands of the private sector. Because they are the ones there on the ground. They are the businesses that will bring the country back after all of this is over. So it's very important to recognize their role as a very important stakeholder and bring them into the conversation of policy making and even in peace building and mediation. So far, they are being ignored. It's only the politicians who made the mess to start with are the ones who are hopefully going to fix it. But continuing to ignore the private sector in the national policies doesn't make sense. What they're doing now is that they're working on the very local levels. So trying to facilitate sanitation, clean water, electricity and energy, even renewable energy, solar systems, solar panels and so on. The private sector is also helping with them, like I told you, stepping in instead of the government with the PPE kits and health equipment in partnerships with international organizations. The private sector is holding the community together and giving people hope. Because I think, and I believe that the solution for Yemen, what will bring peace in Yemen is economy. It's not politics. because when Yemenis know that they have something to lose, like now they're just throwing themselves in the front line because they're getting money in return of being enrolled with the armed factions. But if they have a proper job, if they have like a system around them that is somewhat prosperous, even if it's just covering the basic needs, they will think twice before they join any armed conflict. And so the solution for Yemen is actually economic. It's not political. And this is where the private sector comes in and the business community itself. What I want from the Business for Peace Foundation or from the world to recognize the important role the business community and the private sector plays and should be playing in Yemen, and talk to them directly and not limit the conversations to the politicians.
That's great. It's there's lots of, I guess, room for hope and lots of responsibility there. And yeah, it's thank you. It's economic opportunity can really goes a long way and can be life changing. And hopefully it's the right types of businesses that are getting involved and doing some good. So I wanted to switch topics just a little bit because you've been so involved in media, and not many of our past award winners have that media background. So how are media organizations adapting? Obviously, it's a very important time globally for correct information, access to information. What's the media landscape looking like right now?
Well, as you know, in places where there's conflict and authoritarian regimes, there isn't enough space or much space for independent media. And so a lot of journalists are detained. Some of them are even killed. In the Houthi-controlled areas in the north, there are 4 journalists on death row. There is a clampdown on freedom of expression, and that's on one side. So there is the limited space for expression and doing media, and on the other hand, there is the lack of infrastructure in terms of business modules, because advertising is very limited. You're talking about a war zone, so investment in media is not happening. Especially independent media that is not a political mouthpiece of a certain organization. And so it is very, very hard. The media scenario in Yemen is very, very weak, and it's under attack every day. That being said, because of the internet, and thank God for the internet, so many activists and journalists are able to convey and speak up, even if they're doing it from outside the country. And it allows for other groups who are not usually there, such as women, to speak up and discuss and bring out information. The good thing about social media and the online cyberspace of this is that it allows two-way interaction. So compared to the mainstream media where you have one way, like an article or a TV program, radio and online media encourages interaction. So it helps because if it's two-way, then you get the feel of the people. What are they thinking? What are they worried about? How are they perceiving something or the other? And sometimes so many solutions come from the people. So that way, there is an upside to everything, I suppose.
Right. Yes, and it's sort of like you said earlier too, if those of us can try and visit Yemen Times and other websites to try and support and be informed and put some traffic that way.
The Yemen Times website, unfortunately, is not working, but there are other organizations. I can send some links to things. Some of them are in Arabic, so it may not be like understood by the international community, but those which are in English or the media leaders or the activists could be supported. I mean, just having somebody somewhere in Norway recognizing that a woman who's working on a civil society organization in Taiz, in a remote area, like has a supporter or fan somewhere, it's like, I mean, it brings life back to us.
Yes. Yes, and like you said, thank goodness for the internet in that regard to bring us together. I mean, we wouldn't have been having this conversation otherwise. So it's
imagine if COVID happened when there's no internet.
Yeah.
No,
we wouldn't have the option to work from home. It would be even worse.
I don't want to even think of that.
No, we can put that aside. So much of your career has been focused really on women's empowerment. And can you talk a little bit about the unique role of women? You touched on it earlier, but I'm curious if you should expand on the unique role of women in navigating this crisis.
Uh, um, Globally, women make up around 70% of the health workers, and so this number has not been recognized that much. Now it's time to recognize it, whether we're talking about equal pay or we're talking about promotions or even recognition, just appreciation. I mean, I don't know why this virus is attacking more men than women, but I mean, maybe that's somewhat a mercy from God, because women are really working very hard in the front lines, and they could help. I'm not saying that men don't. I'm biased towards women, I'm afraid, because I've seen how many women in my country are suffering. The gender gap index is the highest in the world. We are at the bottom of the world's rank in terms of the rights and privileges of men compared to women. And so Yemeni women deserve the recognition that they, for the work that they do. They are there in the health centers. They are there in the community-based organizations. They are there in peacemaking and mediation. Can you believe that Yemeni women are able to release political detainees from the different political factions more than the politicians or even the United Nations office? So they've been able to mediate and go through the cultural and traditional norms and extract people from prisons more than the official lines.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, they are powerful. They are just superheroes. Every day, everything they do is remarkable, despite the disadvantages and despite the a lack of resources and even the cultural discrimination against them in countries like Yemen. And this is why, like, it breaks my heart whenever we try to amplify their voices by publishing commentary pieces and op-eds and getting rejected. It's just not right.
No, no, of course. Um, and then I guess that is a bit of a segue into what world you hope to see after this. I know it's a big question, but there seems to be threads of hope throughout these initiatives that you talk about. And a lot of leaders right now are saying this pandemic has caused us to stop and hopefully a chance to rebuild. So what are some sort of priorities for you as we try and rebuild?
Um, to talk to the real actors on the ground and recognize them is very important to navigate the future of Yemen, and I suppose countries with similar conditions, and to facilitate the engagement of the Yemeni community, especially the pioneers and entrepreneurs, to jump to the digital platform, like what's happening around the world. Um, like, let me give you a metaphor. Imagine that the world is standing on a train station, on a platform, and the train that is taking them to the future is passing by, and everybody has tickets except Yemen. So, like, we're not allowed to board this train because we don't have electricity or proper infrastructure for internet or the know-how, the softwares, the smartphones, and the equipment that will enable us to jump into the cyberspace like everybody is going to do after the COVID-19. And so we're left behind on this platform saying everybody board the train to the future, and we're not. So what can we do? What are the tickets per se that we can give the Yemeni people is to help small initiatives in the country and entrepreneurs have access, like help them with the small infrastructures for power supplies, especially if it's renewable, to help them with the infrastructure in terms of the equipment and access to the internet, satellite communication, and the know-how, how to jump on board this space, how to code, how to use the various platforms to market the products, because we need to think about the economy post COVID-19, and everything is moving online. we have to be ready and move online along with it.
Yeah, it's a very illustrative metaphor, and it's things that so many of us, I mean, so many of us take for granted as basic infrastructure. So yes, Yemen needs that as well to help grow.
And it could happen. I mean, I'm not talking about millions and millions of dollars. I mean,
No?
you could easily start off a small project within $1,000 and help a community of around 200 people.
Right.
It's not really that expensive, and it is a war zone. So what we can do is that we can find relatively safer and stable areas and plant the seed there, and it will just be replicated around because people will be jealous of success,
Right.
and they will think, oh, why not in my community? I should have infrastructure. I should have, and the business sector and the private sector is going to be involved. It's just how do we plant the seed, and how do we network the right people, and how do we give that motivation and hope.
That's great. Is there anything else you wanted to share that we haven't covered yet?
um, don't forget women. I mean, I cannot stress enough how important it is to consider women as a main stakeholder when it comes to national and international issues and discussions. For peace in Yemen to happen, to sustainable and fair peace, we need to have women on the table. We need to have women as a main stakeholder, and we need to have them in partnerships without bureaucracy. And we have to cut through the red tapes, and we have to cut through all of that official business and talk to the people who are on the ground and help them do their job better.
Great. That's I think a strong sort of end note to leave this on. And so we'll share all the links you're mentioning. We'll get that out there. And yes, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I think there's a lot to learn, a lot of, like you said, small steps people can do to really help, and such important information to share what's happening elsewhere in the world. So thank you again for taking this time.
Thank you. My pleasure.